What's up guys, Belamy here, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a kind of a review casually of Cast Time Mage, which is the build that I elected to play in Arcade Unchained. When I started playing this character, it was definitely a very, very unpopular way to play Mage. In fact, I don't think anyone really intended on building this way or playing this way. I discussed it on stream for a long time. I wasn't sure which way I was going to go, Cast Time or just attack speed variant on a staff. I ended up going with Cast Time because of how overpowered Arc Lightning was and how I realized that you can scale it kind of insanely if you do the right things. But nevertheless, I managed to get 13.25k gear score right now on this character. I feel like that's geared enough for me to be able to kind of judge the build itself, even at this gear score, versing players who are 15, 16k gear score in raids and in 1 vs 1. This build has no trouble one-shotting them with an Arc Lightning, provided they're not some super tanky cloth healer or something that I'm obviously going to have trouble with as any kind of mage, let alone an undergeared one compared to them or something like that. But to be fair, actually, I'll say, as far as mages go, versus some kind of cloth tank, Cast Time Mage is probably one of the best for trying to take them out, simply because of how much you can chunk someone in cloth as a healer with Arc Lightning if it crits under the right conditions. But nevertheless, we're going to kind of be going over talking about how I geared this character, how I kind of scaled and worked around Arc Lightning, and the ways to make it kind of overpowered, and then giving my kind of take on the build itself, how I enjoy playing it, and how it kind of fares in the current meta. But I can say straight off the bat, for those of you who don't want to stick around and hear my reasons why, this build is kind of broken. It's not crazy. It doesn't have a huge amount of uptime like an attack speed malediction mage who's just going to be constantly on the move, constantly dealing damage, even if they're just throwing out mana bolts and a couple lightning firebolts in between that. But it has incredible one-shot potential, so much so that in raids, it's not even, most of the time, it's not even a bad thing if I'm hitting a raid breaker, because I can crit raid breakers, players who have 50 plus K HP and amazingly insane mitigations, upwards of 40k. And, obviously those kind of players, they're not expecting that kind of damage because no one plays like this. And that's obviously very entertaining for me, or at least just exciting for me to be able to play a character that has that much insane damage potential. I think my personal best Arc Lightning crit on a Raid Breaker was against a 16k gear score Raid Breaker. I can see if I can find them on the gear score charts here real quick. But it was a 16k gear score Raid Breaker who was extremely geared, and I managed to crit them for 50k, or just shy of 50k. It was like 49.6k or something like that. I can't remember the name off the top of the head, but I'll put a screenshot of that on the screen right now. It was in Halcyona. It was under the right conditions. I charmed them, I discorded them, hit them with a fireball, hit them with an arc, and I one-shot them. Well, it was just shy of a one-shot. Technically, I two-shot them because my flame bolt hit them for about 7k, which brought their HP from about 55k, I think they had, below 50k. And then the Arc Lightning, which hit for almost 50k, finished them off. So it was a pretty insane crit. That's my personal best against a Raid Breaker. Obviously, players who are not geared and super tanky, I can crit for way, way higher. But, if you're hitting someone with 25 to 30k HP for 70k, cool, you're really overkilling them and it's hot as shit. But if you're hitting someone who has 50k HP, who's probably never been one-shot before, and you're deleting them, they're probably going to say, hey, wait a second, what the fuck just hit me? And being the person who makes people think that, or, go, what the fuck just hit me, is the most satisfying thing about this build. Just being able to Arc Lightning someone from 32 meters out on a magic circle and one-shot them, no matter basically who it is kind of insane. And I'm very undergeared. Like, if we'll go over my gear in a minute, but basically there's so much more potential for this build, and it would get just exponentially nuttier as things go on. So let me check real quick. Is my my dream rings all okay? Costumes of all, I had to wash my costumes because they're all expired. But we'll go over my stats and my gear now. First thing first, I'm obviously using a staff. Staff is a no-brainer for a cast time build because it's going to give you the +2 meters on your magic skills, which is very, very nice when you're standing still, hoping that people stay within your range. It's going to give you 5% skill damage and obviously 7% cast time, which is a huge chunk of cast time reduction. So that's really, really nice. It's a no-brainer. You have to go with staff if you want to play a cast time build. Technically, you don't have to, but it's definitely better, especially with the way that magic attack and having a staff is obviously going to give you a bit more magic attack than dual wield. Scales your arc lightning, which is the main skill that we're focused on when playing this build. Now, the three things that you're looking at stacking are, in my build, crit damage. You can do a defense pen version of this build. Late game, like when people have like 13k plus resilience, I think defense pen build on a staff cast time mage is probably a little bit better. But up until that point, so that includes now on Arcade Unchained and up until now, crit damage is without a doubt the way to go. Late game, when people are extremely geared on average, then the D-pen might be the way to go. I think it would probably outperform, and it would obviously be a lot more consistent because you don't have to rely on the crits. But for right now, the crit damage is kind of insane, and so we're scaling crit damage. We're scaling magic skill damage. That's how we get our Arc Lightning Nutty. We'll talk about that in a sec. And obviously cast time. So you can see my cast time is 63.7%. You can get this all the way down to 40%. I'll talk about that more later in the video as well. But 63.7% is a very comfortably good amount of cast time. That paired with Mana Fountain, when I use a Magic Circle or Inciting Lens, is going to reduce my sorcery skills by another 15%. That doesn't apply here. That's after the fact on your sorcery skills only. So you can see, like, just casting fireballs, it's quite fast when just throwing flame fireballs. And these chunk quite hard with my build against players. I can, just sit and hard cast on a player and kind of burn them down pretty quickly if they're not getting, like, focused heals. And obviously, every 6 seconds, I can throw an Arc Lightning on them, and it's going to do even more damage. And if I'm debuffing them and things like that, obviously, just those fireballs are kind of insane. But I can cast very, very fast, is the thing. With even with my cast time right now and Mana Fountain, my Arc Lightning cast time is down to 1.8 seconds. If I use a Nodachi, it's even faster. My Meteor Strike is down to 2.5 seconds, which is really nice. I could easily get that down to 2 seconds with the right amount of cast time. We'll talk about that more. But essentially, we're scaling those three things: the crit damage, the skill damage, and the cast time for obvious reasons. So the reason why we're scaling the magic skill damage is because it scales our Arc Lightning really, really, really insanely. Now, Arc Lightning has a really high base damage. You can see my Arc Lightning here does almost 30k base damage, which is made up of the 5.4k-ish damage plus 1,354% of my magic attack. So the more magic attack I have here, the more base damage the Arc Lightning is going to do, which obviously complements having a staff and more magic attack. But what you might not realize looking at this at first glance is that skill damage actually scales this as well. So the easiest way for me to show this is I can just take a ring off. This ring has intelligence, so I will lose a tiny bit of magic attack. But if we look at our Arc Lightning, we're looking at 1,354% increased on magic attack and a nearly 30k base. If I take my ring off, which deducts a little bit of skill damage, actually a better way to do this, I'll take my Flawless Dream Ring off. Would that ring go? Here. Okay. I'll take my Flawless Dream Ring off because this just gives me skill damage. It's not going to reduce my my intelligence by any bit. So I take this off, I'm going to lose 3%, and that's going to reduce it down to 1,322%, and I'm already down to under 29,000 base damage on this. So the skill damage is kind of insane when we're in combat and we're doing things like Stalker's marking people. That's going to increase their received magic damage by 16%, which essentially functions as 16% more skill damage. That does not scale this per se, but it's going to scale my damage. And we can do things like Chanty, which gives us a crazy amount of magic like skill damage. So if I just play Chanty here, you can watch the Arc Lightning. You can see the base damage of it goes well over 35k at the final tick of the Chanty. It'll go even higher if you have more points of Chanty here. So if I were running my non 1v1 spec, so if I do this and just pick up 2 extra points and I get the extra 2 seconds on perform skills, and I play Chanty, you can look, it'll go 35k, 35.5, and it'll stop at about that. So it gets even higher. And then obviously things like our Nodachi pop is going to give us a crazy amount of skill damage. It gives 25%, I believe. So popping that is going to give us 25%, and this is going to pump it up to 35k on its own. And then obviously on top of Chanty, we're looking at over 40k base damage, which you just saw there for a second. And you can scale this with a bunch of different things just in your kit itself. You obviously have the Nodachi, which is going to give you 25%. Standing on a magic circle is going to give you a bunch of flat magic attack, which then scales this as well. So you can see just standing on the magic circle alone gets us up to 31.5. Then playing Chanty on top of that is going to take us to 37, almost 38k, you know. If you were to throw on a life startling strain, obviously that Chanty is going to be even more powerful and scale your skill damage even higher. So there are a lot of ways to really scale your skill damage and get this kind of insane. There's a lot of things in my gear that I could be missing that I could get even more skill damage. Like if I made an Aeronol ring, I could get another, almost 1.5% just off that. If I was in leather, I'm in cloth. If I was in leather, I'd have even more skill damage because leather has slightly higher base skill damage, so I'd have another 1 or 2% from that or something. If I tiered my costume up to Eternal, I get another 1%. Like, there's a lot of ways to min-max this, and obviously getting your magic attack up is even better as well. So there are a lot of ways to scale your skill damage and different things like that to make this kind of ridiculous. You know, a skill that does 40k base damage, and then scaling that with percentages, things like crit damage, is obviously going to get nutty, and it does. It gets quite insane. So that's essentially how Arc Lightning works. You can scale the base damage on it ridiculously well, and it's super easy to do. And I forgot to point out, if you Flame Bolt someone, they're going to be taking 30% increased damage from that Arc Lightning. You see Arc Lightning deals 30% additional damage to burning targets. That essentially functions as 30% more skill damage. So that means that this is going to deal 30%. You know, you basically, if you do the math, which I have done, baby, you can very easily, comfortably, with this amount of cast time, get your Arc Lightning to about 50k base damage. And then when you factor in a crit, debuffs on the target, the mitigations that they have, you end up with really insane crits. And even if you're just being lazy and you don't even fireball, just arcing someone in general is going to result in a 15 to 20k crit just on its own if it crits. But we'll look at my stats real quick, and I'll explain just a little bit about critical damage. But we can see my critical rate is only 75%. It's really, really low. That's because I switched my critical rate rolls on my staff and my bow to defense penetration or magic defense penetration super early. I wouldn't recommend doing that. You kind of want the consistency a little bit later. I think once I had like my hood to mythic and the extra gem slot and maybe some higher tier gems for the extra few percent, and my immortal title, you see I only have commander, which has given me 1%. At immortal, I'd get a 3%. So once my critical rate is, once I get it above like 80%, close to 85%, we'll be comfortable, and my crits will be a lot more consistent. I would get that with this build if I just, min-maxed a few things that I have left to do, but I just haven't got there yet because I haven't been playing heaps in the last like 2 weeks. So this is where I'm at right now. My build is still insane, but we can see we got 222.3% magic critical damage. The way crit damage works with resilience, depending on who you're hitting, whether they have 10 to 12k resilience, which is about the average, somewhere in between there. I have just shy of 10k right now, and I'm kind of low on the side. most geared players on Arcade Unchained right now probably have around 12k, and I think that's being generous for a lot of them. But at about 12k resilience, they're going to be negating a little bit over 150% of your critical damage. They cannot negate the first 50%, so essentially the way that works is you always have the 50% bonus, and then the next about 100, let's say 160 to be generous. So the next 160 critical damage you have is basically doing nothing against a player that has 12k resilience. So essentially, if I have 200% magic critical damage and I'm hitting someone with 12k resilience, I'm only really getting the 50% bonus that cannot be negated at the start. I'm not getting any extra additional damage from the rest of my critical damage. It's only once I start pushing over 210% and kind of pushing past their resilience pool that the crit damage starts to get insane. So right now, I'm only at 222%, 0.3%. So at someone with 12k resilience, I technically have about 62% true critical damage, right? Now, I'm a spell singer, so that means that if I stack my songs, I get upwards of, we'll stack it real quick here, and that's going to give me 30% more magic critical damage, which means that for every rhythm stacks that I have, it's going to be true critical damage against anyone who's, X amount of resilience or less. And anyone who's played a crit build to this point before, where you've got to the point where you're starting to hit 210, 220%, 230, 240% critical damage, that's when your damage starts to take off. Because obviously, nothing's happening with the first 150% that you put on your gear. It's not doing anything. You're really just pushing you're pushing to get past the threshold of resilience, and then at that point, it gets insane because it's actually giving you percent increases. And a percent increase on a base damage that's so insanely high on something like Arc Lightning obviously gets ridiculous. So you can see here at full rhythm stacks, I'm at 252%. So essentially, I'm at about 92% magic critical damage bonus against a person with 12k resilience. Against someone with 10k, I'm probably closer to 110, 120s there somewhere. But that's essentially doubling my crit damage at this point. It's kind of messed up to explain. I hope I did an alright job at that. But basically, every point of crit damage that I get from here on out is going to be is just way, way better. And it really, really shows. So, when my staff gets to Eternal, I'm going to get another 9%. My bow, Mythic, and Eternal, I'm going to get another 6 and then 12%. And, my cloak is only Divine Ionad right now, so I can get another 5% out of that. My costume is only Legendary. I can get another, I think, 2-3% out of that when it's Eternal. So there's still a lot of crit damage potential in this build. And the more I get ahead of the curve in terms of my crit damage compared to people's average resilience, the crazier this build is going to get. Obviously, it's going to hit a cap when I max out my crit damage, and, people are sitting at like 13. Some crazy people will get to like 14k resilience if they're super, super geared. At that point, it may be worth switching to defense pen. But right now, this build's kind of insane. And obviously, the percent increases, which a D-pen build doesn't have, is really, really good on a base damage skill like Arc Lightning with such a high base damage. So, early game to like mid to late game, crit damage is definitely the way to go. If you play this build, it's not super hard for you to re-roll it into a defense pen kind of build later on, if that's something you want to do. If you end up among all the whales, that's fine. But for pug stomping and hitting any person who's, equal or lesser geared than you, or even slightly higher than you, you're gonna shit on them with a ton of fucking damage regardless. Now, the playstyle of this build is what we'll talk about next. Now, it's kind of clunky, and it's definitely nowhere near as good in pug stomping things like Halcyona as an attack speed mage. And that's generally because you're versing people who are pretty average geared, or they don't understand how they geared their character very well. So it's quite easy to kill a group of players. And as a attack speed mage, you're constantly on the move chasing people down if you're wiping over them, and you're able to dish out damage while moving forward. Whereas a cast time mage, you have to obviously be standing still to deal your damage. Granted, when you do stand still and you can dish out damage, your damage is insane and it's way higher than an attack speed malediction mage, for example. But I find that in things like Halcyona, when we're pug stomping and we're running over the enemy faction, everyone that I tab target to is dying too fast for me to even cast Arc Lightning on them. I may be able to get some fireballs off on them, and hit them for a decent amount. Like some players I'll hit for anywhere around 10k with a single fireball. That's obviously good, but I want to be one-shotting them with Arc Lightning, hitting them for 30k. So obviously I want to cast Arc Lightning, and by the time I cast Arc Lightning, even if it is a 2-second cast time, or less than 2 seconds for me, most of the time they're already dead from all of the archers and malediction mages running in their face, throwing crashing waves and fucking endless arrows at them, hitting them for a heap of damage. So people generally die too quick, and in things like Halcyona, I find myself sitting a little bit further back and debuffing tanks and trying to one-shot them, which I generally do pretty often. And that's kind of where I fit in that kind of system. But when it comes to more high-end raids, things like guild versus guild or faction versus faction on your own server, where the average player is probably a lot more geared and a lot more coordinated, that's when this build starts to get good, because you can find yourself in a good position within your raid where you can sit on a magic circle, debuff a target, and then shit on them and one-shot them. And you can do that to most players. Even tanks, a lot of tanks, if they're in plate and they haven't geared correctly and they don't have a what's it called? What's that skill called? I always forget this skill. The one, conversion shield. Why do I always forget that skill? If they don't have a conversion shield up, they're basically breakfast for you. You can take them out, no problem. Sometimes it depends. You know what I mean? Like if they're a 16k gear score tank that's in cloth and they have hero gems and a hero cloak, you're obviously not going to do much damage to them. But if they're a plate and they're not, if they're plate and you debuff them and, you can charm them and things like that, you can hit them for a ridiculous amount of damage, like you saw in the screenshot that I put up on screen earlier. It's quite common that you'll see 30k, 40k crits on a raid breaker if you debuff them correctly and you get the right setup. Now, like I said, the playstyle, it's kind of clunky. Obviously, standing still sometimes can be bad. You can find yourself getting picked quite easily because you are standing still. Staying mobile in a game is obviously really, really good, and that's what makes things like Archer and Malediction attack speed mages really, really good in raids, because they can continue to move constantly while dishing out their damage, which means it's harder for them to get caught out. Me, I have to stand on a magic circle, and I'm popping Nodachi, and I'm trying to cast Arc Lightning, and I think a lot of people have now realized at this point that if I'm able to free cast on someone, I'm going to kill targets. So if they see me free casting, it's very easy for them to get on top of me, and they want to because they need me to die. So it's a tough style of gameplay because you're very vulnerable in group play if you don't position yourself correctly. You do have incredible range though. With a staff and sitting on a magic circle, you can be casting from 32 meters out, so you can get pretty ridiculous with your range. That's very good in the water, especially when you're using the elevation. People are up and down, high and low. You can sit under people at a decent range. And although it's quite simple for archers to reach you, you just kind of hope that you can position yourself in a way that it's difficult for archers to reach you, and in a way that you're close enough to the enemy raid that you can just free cast on whatever target you need to hit. But like I said, in things like Halcy, it's kind of clunky. It's not the greatest. You won't find yourself getting like crazy amounts of kills and bloodstorms and things like that because you don't have a crazy amount of uptime on your skills. You're more or less, you can one-shot someone with the Arc Lightning and then maybe do a God's Whip animation cancel, fuck a few people, like one or two people up with that, and then you're basically just free casting, trying to cast fireballs or throw out debuffs to keep some songs up for your raid, or maybe throw out a meteor. But like I said, in Halsey, most of the time people are dying so fast that by the time your meteor is coming down, the people who were in your meteor are already dead. Or your raid's getting stomped, and by the time you can free cast some shit, their front line are already in your back line and you're getting stomped yourself. So in Halcyona, not the best. You're not going to be montaging people in Halcyona as a cast time mage unless you're just doing a one-shot montage and whatever. You know what I mean? However, when it comes to 1v1, this build is kind of good. All you really have to do as a spell singer, as a spell singer with a cast time mage setup, is put a magic circle down at the start of the fight, initiate on your target. Doesn't matter what you do, you could just chain lightning them to open, just for a stun, and then you could just backdrop and throw one fireball, and then you return to your magic circle, and then you cast your arc lightning. If that arc lightning goes off, you win. Simple as that. Unless for some reason they're a healer with a mana barrier, or some kind of insane tank that can tank your arc lightning, or if it by chance doesn't crit, maybe you'll be in trouble. But if that arc lightning goes off, you win every single time. There's just no question about it. If you can get the arc lightning off, you win. That's how every fight goes. Now, most fights, I can run out, put a magic circle down. I'll put some clips on screen. I have a PvP video. You can go check that out. I'll initiate with a chain lightning, do a backdrop, Gods Whip animation, cancel, get them distracted over here so they're facing away from my magic circle, and then I'll return to my magic circle, immediately turn an arc lightning. If they're not already dead, because my damage is pretty good with everything else, the arc lightning kills them. And now most people will say, well, Belamy, what's the point of having a cast time build for one skill? Everything else you do in a 1v1 is instant speed. The attack speed would benefit you a lot more, right? You're using chain lightning, you're using Gods Whip animation cancel. Everything you do, you're using, lightning, meteor strike. Everything you do is instant speed. Wouldn't attack speed just be better? The answer is, yeah, sure, it would help with that stuff, but it's completely unnecessary, because with how overpowered Gods Whip animation cancel is, you don't really need good attack speed to animation cancel fast. I have 200 ping, and I do it more than fast enough. And with things like my GCDs, sometimes it can get me caught out, because my GCDs on some things, or global cooldowns, if you don't know what GCDs are a bit high, and it sometimes gets me caught out. I'll find myself, after an animation cancel or something, I'll find myself trying to return to a magic circle, but I'm still on a huge GCD because I have no attack speed kind of helping with the GCD, that I'll be spamming my key to return to magic circle, but I'm still on GCD, and I'm spamming it ready to press my arc lightning, and then I'll find myself just standing still and pressing arc lightning, because I'm spamming my magic circle, it's on GCD, and then I'm expecting myself to return to my circle, but it gets blocked by the GCD, and I end up hard casting arc lightning in someone's face, and it gets me killed. But as long as you're playing safe and you're playing in a way that helps, and you get used to the playstyle and used to the times of the cooldowns on your GCDs, you can work around that pretty easily. So anytime you cast arc lightning, it's pretty much a free win. You take your hand off the keyboard and you kill them. You can do such a crazy amount of damage with your arc lightning in a 1v1 against pretty much anyone. It doesn't matter if they're a mage in cloth, if they're a mage in leather, or melee in leather, or God forbid someone's in plate. I feel bad for them, honestly. Most people cannot tank the arc lightning. My PvP video is a testament to that. I made that video when I was way less geared than I am now, and my damage was already crazy then. It's just even more ridiculous now. So there's not much more to really say about cast time mage. It is kind of insane. You're obviously just spamming arc lightning. You're an arc lightning bot. You're really just playing around getting that arc lightning off in group play and in 1v1. A lot of the time, just because how good mage is, your damage just from an animation cancel, fireball, God's Whip, is probably going to be insane enough to kill most players who are in leather or plate, if they're not, super tanky anyway, which is nice. That definitely helps this build because you're not reliant on just standing still. If it was just fireballs and God's Whips, you'd probably be in some trouble. You really couldn't get away with this kind of playstyle because you have no real way, especially as a spell slinger, to kind of lock people down for any kind of extended period of time. To be able to cast Arc Lightning on them, you kind of just have to outplay them, using other skills to, get their attention elsewhere. Return to your magic circle, hit them with the Arc Lightning, and you'll kill them. Obviously, if you played something like Dagger Spell or whatever you might want to play, you can kind of set up your Arc Lightning with CC abilities, but with Defiance in the game, they're kind of unreliable, and a lot of the time, I just don't like playing with kind of CC chains to set up big hitting skills because most of the time they'll just Defiance out of it and it'll get you killed. So this definitely suits the current meta for me for Cast Time Mage, just being able to outplay people with Magic Circle and then casting your Arc Lightning. Obviously, it's super easy to do. Your Arc Lightning is getting scaled crazy with your Magic Circle teleport. And you can teleport back to your Magic Circle very easily and immediately cast Arc Lightning from 32 meters out. Whoever you're attacking is going to be within 32 meters, whether it's an archer, a melee, and as long as you're not getting silenced or interrupted, most of the time you won't because you're 32 meters away. That's a pretty decent distance, and you're casting quite quickly. So yeah, it's really, really good. Now I'm going to skip forward a little bit here, and we're just going to do a little bit of damage testing. Obviously, you can go watch my PvP video of me a little bit undergeared compared to now, doing some arena and different things like that if you want to see how it kind of fares up in Arcade Unchained. But I got a healer, and we're going to just slap them around a little bit and just show you guys the Arc Lightning power. Okay, so the first target that we used while doing our damage test was a player that was just changing from plate armor over to cloth armor, so they weren't as tanky as what we could have ideally tested against. So I went ahead and got Naoko here, another guildie, who's going to help us out. They are 15k gear score in cloth, about as tanky as a player can really get on average without being just a full-blown mitigation tank, raid breaker or something of the like. So they have 36.5k HP. They're in cloth, they have a mythic buff, they're very, very tanky. Most mage players, you shouldn't be aiming someone who's this geared with cloth, right? You most likely want to be hitting someone in leather or someone less geared in cloth or a DPS in cloth, not someone who has 36k HP and can heal themselves, right? So this is a good target for us to test on. We're going to go ahead and we'll just start doing some basic combos and we'll go into some more complicated ones at the end just to see how high we can push our damage. So first one, what we're going to do is we're just going to Magic Circle. We're going to Fireball into Bloody Chanty for our Song damage buff, and then we're going to Arc, and we got okay, we didn't crit. We'll do that again one more time here real quick when Arc comes off cooldown. So we'll go into our Fireball, into Chanty, into our Arc Lightning, and we got a 15.6k crit. So almost 16k, not a bad chunk against a player. They do have 36k HP, so it wasn't quite half their HP. But, considering they're cloth and, this isn't someone you should be hitting in a group, that's a pretty good chunk, I would say, for a basic combo like that. Next combo, I'm just going to do the same thing, except I'm going to add in Stalker's Mark for the additional skill damage and see how much that affects our damage. So, drop our Magic Circle, we're going to Stalker's Mark, Fireball, into Chanty, into our Arc Lightning, and we got a 19.8k crit. So just the 16% additional skill damage from our Stalker's Mark has taken us to almost 20k, which is more than half their HP, so that's pretty good. My crit damage stacks fell off there for a sec, so let me just restack them. And then for the next combo, we're going to do the same thing, but this time we're going to add in the Life Startling Strain onto myself, which is just going to make the Bloody Chanty buff my damage slightly more. So, min-maxing our damage a little bit here. We'll throw that in, and we'll see just how much that increases our damage, and see if we can't get a 20k plus crit on this 15k Mythic buff healer here. So we're going to Magic Circle, and then we're going to Stalker's Mark. I'll buff myself with Startling Strain if it will let me. It's on the wrong keybind. So we're going to Fireball into Chanty, into our Arc Lightning, and we should get a nice crit here. So we got 20.7k. So I buffed it a little bit. It's only giving us a little bit more boost on our Bloody Chanty skill damage increased. If we had someone else playing songs for us, it would be a little bit better, but that was still pretty good. We hit 20k. That's not bad. Okay, so this time, instead of Bloody Chanty, I'm going to try throwing in Critical Discord instead. Now, my cast time's not quite good enough to use both without a Nodachi pop, but we'll try that in a sec. But I'm going to try Critical Discord instead of Chanty, because this is a cloth player, which means they have a lot of magic defense. So the 30% magic damage or magic defense reduction might actually be really good against them. So I'm going to go ahead, restack my crit stacks here real quick, and then we'll hit them with a fireball into a Critical Discord and then into my Arc Lightning from there. So we'll drop our magic circle, we'll hit them with a mark, I'll hit them with a fireball, into Discord, into an Arc Lightning, and we got 22.5, so that did yield better results than our Bloody Chanty. Unfortunately, like I said, with my current cast time, I can't use both because of how the speed of my Arc Lightning cast time. It is 1.8 seconds, which is really, really, really good, but it's not quite good enough to fit in both of those. If I know Dachi, I might be able to fit them in, so we'll try that here in a second, and hopefully I don't mess that up. But we'll go ahead and we'll try that. So we'll try for the hardest I can hit with an Arc Lightning against this player without being buffed. So what we're going to do is we have our crit stacked. We're going to Magic Circle. We're going to pop Free Runner just to get the extra GCD to make this a little bit easier. We're going to Startling Strain. And then we're going to pop our Nodachi, Fireball, Discord, Chanty into Arc Lightning. That makes sense? Alright, simple, right? Okay, so we're going to pop that. We're going to pop this. We're going to pop our Nodachi after we Stalker's Mark. So Nodachi, Stalker's Mark, drop this. Fireball, Discord, into Chanty, into our Arc Lightning. Hopefully it goes off in time. It did. Okay, so we got it all off. We hit them for 31.8k. Almost 32k. Not quite enough to one-shot this healer, but that's a really huge chunk of damage. And I'm sure if we followed up that Arc Lightning with a backdrop God's Whip animation cancel, we could probably kill them in a real scenario. However, that kind of combo is kind of unrealistic, trying to do it on a player who's, moving around, might move out of your attack range, might CC you, or someone might mess you up, or you might, fuck it up your own way. Whatever the situation might be, that itself is kind of unrealistic to do with the Nodachi and everything. However, if you get your cast time down closer to 40%, which is going to be entirely possible when the huge balance patch change comes in the future, you should be able to do that kind of combo quite easily because your Arc Lightning cast time will be closer to 1.2, 1.1, maybe 1.3, somewhere around that range cast time, which will make getting all those debuffs and buffs on yourself up much, much easier because you're not having such a long cast time on your Arc Lightning. So, pretty good. Our damage is pretty solid for a player that's 15k gear score here. I'm 13.2. My damage is good. Could be a lot better, min-maxing it. But yeah, damage is very, very solid. Just for the sake of it, one more time, we'll hit them with a non-Nodachi hit with our Startling Strain, just to see the damage again one more time because it's fun to do. So we're going to put our Magic Circle down. We're going to buff ourselves with Strain, Stalker's Mark. We're going to Fireball, into Chanty, into an Arc Lightning, and we should get a nice 20k crit. There we go. Alright, nice. Pretty consistent damage, not bad. Again, we're not one-shotting this player, but realistically, as a mage, you shouldn't be one-shotting a 15k gear score mythic buff healer in cloth. So, that's pretty good damage. I think that's a pretty good benchmark to set on. If I was hitting them in plate or someone in leather, obviously the damage numbers are going to be quite ridiculous. And you can see that in my PvP videos under simple situations. Most of the Arc Lightning crits in my video are against someone who's not even debuffed with Fireball or Stalker's Mark. Most of the time I don't even have Chanty up. It's just Magic Circle Arc Lightning and I'm hitting people for 15, 16, 17, 18, 20k. Just with a standstill Arc Lightning against leather players and things like that. So the damage is insane. It's really, really good. And, it's a fun way to play. So, to give my final thoughts on Cast Time Mage, I'd say it is way more viable than what people would make it out to be and what you would assume based on the current meta. Granted, Attack Speed Mage currently is really, really good, and I think that's the main reason why you don't see Cast Time Mages as often. They're still really good. Being Cast Time Mage, it's just that Attack Speed Mage is kind of insane. And not only that, it's really fun to play. Obviously, being on the move constantly, dealing damage is really, really good. But the great thing about playing a cast time mage is you can kind of dabble in both fields. Being a Songcraft mage, like a Spellsinger, you get enough attack speed from different sources that you can kind of play that instant style, Spellsinger playstyle, which is what you see me doing in most of my videos. I'm basically just playing an attack speed style mage, but I'm able to throw in a fucking big juicy arc lightning every now and again, or in groups I'm able to run wave media and stuff like that without it feeling shit. And that's essentially the big difference, is I take cast time so that these extra skills that hit like absolute trucks can be used comfortably, and I just use my my Songcraft and my abilities to actually play that instant speed style mage still as well on the side. So I can still animation cancel God's Whip, no problem. I can still backdrop fireball people with a good amount of fireballs. I can still do all that instant speed stuff, run instant speed media, all that kind of juicy stuff. But it just means that I'm able to throw in a big arc lightning for a big chunk of damage against a beefy player, or to finish someone off in a lot of scenarios. And in my opinion, I think it's the best way to play Spellsinger in the current meta. Yes, you can go ahead and play attack speed mage and have a good time as a Spellsinger, but I still think that if you're going to play Spellsinger and you have no interest in messing around with Malediction, cast time is definitely the way to go, because yes, the attack speed may help your other abilities in some way, but being able to use Arc Lightning is so insanely good in the current meta, just because people are pretty tanky, and, you know, being able to chunk someone in cloth or someone in leather for a huge amount of damage is really, really good, because if you can't quite burn them fast enough through heals, they can't heal through a 25k crit if they're an archer or something like that, right? If they're getting focused heals or in a raid, things like that, where you have protection and you can sit on a magic circle and free cast, you can dish out insane amounts of single target damage. And unlike a Malediction mage or a single attack speed mage, you're not doing lots of small hits really quickly. You're literally chunking them for a 20k hit every 6 seconds when your Arc Lightning comes off cooldown. So if I had to say whether or not, if I started again, would I play attack speed mage or would I play cast time mage? I think I'd play cast time mage. I think attack speed mage is getting nerfed a little bit in the future. We'll still see them around as much, but I think cast time mage is definitely going to make a breakout when that happens. I think we'll see a lot more people running spell singers and dagger spells and things like that on, and, you know, building around arc lightning and meteor strikes and things like that, which is super exciting for me as a player who's already way ahead of the curve on that front. But as long as you can handle the clunkiness of the build in things like Halcyona, and you don't mind you know, being a little bit slow to the take up just because everyone else is just running around throwing out abilities full speed, and you have to kind of stand still if you want to dish out your big damage when all your other fast stuff is on cooldown, then this may be the build for you. I have a lot of fun playing it. Chunking people for 20k, 25k, 30k with an Arc Lightning in raids is extremely fun to do. Deleting people is always good in any MMO game or any game in general. I think everyone kind of enjoys it. I think it's satisfying as hell. So, cast time mage, it's very, very good. Way better than what I was expecting it to be. You know, I ran the numbers before eventually going the cast time route, and it seemed a little bit too good to be true when I was running the math on all the arc lightning damage and things like that. But it you know, I'm still only 13k gear score. I'm still behind the curve as far as average gear score on my server. So, considering the damage that I'm already dealing against way more geared players than myself, this build is just going to get even nuttier as you get better gear and better weapons and, you know, more crit damage and things like that. So, the build is insane. I have a lot of fun playing it. I would highly recommend it to anyone who likes playing any kind of mage where you don't mind actually casting a fucking spell for a change. I know if you're coming from any other kind of MMO, that won't be something crazy to you, but for Arcage, currently, you know, a mage, most of them don't want to have to stand still to cast something. You know, they're not used to it because of how good Malediction and Cast Time Mage has been in recent years. So, Cast Time Mage, really, really good. Highly recommend it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the Fresh Start server. That'll be going live Later today, when I upload this video, I will be playing a Swiftblade melee. Most likely, I might try Archer. I'm still a little bit up in the air on that, but I'll most likely be returning to Arcade Unchained shortly thereafter because I do really enjoy playing my cast time mage, and I'm not sure I really want to commit all of my life to gearing another character in another server on Arcade. So, see you guys there if you're around. If not, I hope you enjoyed the video again, and see you guys next time. Cheers.